Hope everyone's having a good afternoon, and definitely enjoyed hearing Chad's talk and hearing about the state of the industry. There's so much going on in the industry, and that from of those top insights of what's most important, we're going to address a lot of that in just a couple of minutes. So, are we, Chad? We good to go? Ready to rock and roll? All right. So, let me get this clicker working. Okay, here we go. I just want to kick off a little bit differently than normal. Right now, people are exhausted and people are drained. I mean, how do you blend life at home and life at work? I was having lunch with Chad on Monday, and he said the home used to be a refuge, and now it's a classroom and an office. And now you're doing your job and you're managing a classroom and all the stresses that go on with a lack of clarity and the unknown. And so you're wondering, like, if your kids are in school, are they there for good? Is it going to close down? What does October look like? What does my job look like? How do I travel? And are you going to be in quarantine because of a teacher or a student or a coworker was exposed? And so as a leader, how do you keep all this together? Do you bring everyone back to the office, or do you keep them from home? Do you blend it? Every organization, every industry is working hard to navigate the challenges. I mean, I feel it. This is me and this is my family. It's my wife, Megan. She just started grad school in October. She put it off for years as we were having kids, and now she's back in it. And we have three other kids in school. And baby Alice, we adopted her a year ago this month, and it is incredible to see her grow. She's 3. Ezra is 7. Elliot's 11. Titus is 14. We live on the soccer fields and we live in the virtual classroom while growing a business and all those challenges that go in with life. All of these things create exhaustion. And in that exhaustion, oftentimes we lack clarity and we lack the ability to rest. And without rest, I don't know about you, but I get a little bit irritable at home and irritable at work. We've all been there. And for years, the reason why I do what I do, the reason why Insight exists is simple. There is a moment where I'm tired of seeing leaders going home physically and emotionally drained. You've been there. You get in the car and after work and you have that migraine and you're exhausted, and now you have to go home and you're supposed to be on at home, but you're drained from work. And so we feel drained, we feel ineffective. So we develop leaders' soft skills while leveraging their strengths. How do we help you see what you're great at, what gives you the most energy in the way that you do your work? And we help them rest, hustle, and grind so that you can be transformative and healthy leaders. Leaders who love life at work and leaders who love life at home, especially when those are the same location. So we got to look at what leadership is. I love Peter Block, a management guru. He prefers the term stewardship to leadership. And he defines stewardship as this: the willingness to be accountable for the well-being of the larger organization by operating in service rather than in control of those around us. Note, it's not just about who is reporting to you, but as leaders, as individuals in the organization. How are we accountable for the larger organization? Think about the bigger picture, not just our slivers. And we operate in service. How can we help? How can we build up? How can we empower? How can we train? How can we value rather than how can we control? It's a shift in our thinking and our mindset that if we make that heart shift and that mindset shift, our behavior will change and you will see your firm continue to develop. As Chad mentioned in his state of the art, state of the industry talk, the stats show there's a clear need for leadership development and empowering and motivating your people. Leadership is about serving. It's about equipping. It's about empowering the team, even when it is difficult, even when life makes it hard. We still have to lead. We can't just crawl into a cave and hope things will work out. Leadership is about removing barriers so that our teams can succeed. It is about bearing the weight so that our teams can run without it. There's a weight that we feel as leaders. That's what we sign up for. And we need to make sure our team members, our employees, aren't bearing their weight that we should be. So you have an organization, a team, a client, a project, a budget, and your role is to be a steward of it. It's about serving, not being served. It's about giving, not taking. And I can go on with that for hours. Here's the deal. I've never met a leader that says, I don't want to be transformational. We all want to be transformational leaders. No one says, I just want to be a transactional leader that gets mediocre results. We don't say we want that, but sometimes that's what happens under stress. Transformational leaders provide vision, provide clarity, and lead with empathy while driving for results. But it's hard. It's a challenge. My dilemma was this. I was in my 20s and I was leading a team of about 7 or 8, and I was getting the results. I was mission driven. We're going to accomplish our plans. If it's in the strategic plan, we are going to get that result, and nothing will get in my way. And guys, there was a wake of dead bodies in the background, not literal, but metaphorical, people that I ran over for the result. I might have done a good job on paper, but not in reality. It's not good leadership. It's not servant leadership. It's not being the person, the leader that I wanted to be. That told me there's got to be a way to have healthy relationships and get great results. The challenge is there. It's easy to swing the other way. Great relationships, but mediocre results. Let's not do that. So how do we solve the tension? How do we simply lead? It's an art and it's a science. It's relational and it's about results. And so let me lay this foundation here. I love to be on the river. Chad mentioned getting him back on his bike. I like kayaking and I enjoy biking. And biking sometimes takes less time than kayaking. But here we go. We're in the river. And on the river, sometimes you have to rest. Sometimes you have to hustle. And sometimes you have to grind. And during the COVID time, even though maybe it slowed down for a little bit, we have to hustle and we have to grind. So I was 15 years old and we went out to Colorado to go whitewater rafting. And there's a kayak by the raft. And I talked to the guide who just walked out of the shack and there's some smoke billowing out of it. And I said, hey, can I jump in that kayak? And he said, have you ever been in a kayak? And I said, yes, because I had been in a kayak. I didn't clarify. It was like 5th grade scouts on a lake in North Carolina. And so there we were. We're getting ready to get on the river. It's class 2, 3, and 4 rapids, mostly 3s and 4s. And I'm in a kayak for the first time. And so we start to head down this way. And why my parents let me do that, I don't know, but they did. And the guide said, hey, do you know what an eddy is? And I said, no, I don't know what an eddy is. And that's when whatever he was smoking started to wear off a little bit. And he said, hey, it's where there's a shift in the current and there's always an eddy where you can pull into and find rest. And when you're in that eddy, you look to where you're going and how you're going to get there. How are you going to navigate what is coming next? And as leaders in organizations that's constantly changing, yet alone during this COVID time, how do we find rest? We find rest, meaning our heartbeat slows down a little bit. Our anxiety slows down a little bit because we know where we're going and we know how we're going to get there. It's no surprise that organizations that at least have a strategic plan do better than ones that don't, yet alone organizations that actually execute on that plan, because when we have a plan and we have a vision, it's much easier to move forward in a healthy way. So we have to be able to rest. As leaders, as teams, as organizations, we've got to be able to find the eddy if we're going to be healthy leaders that get results and have healthy relationships. The second thing is about the hustle. We hustle, meaning that's like you're in the rapids, you're navigating it, you're flying, it is tough, but you're going. We can't just let the current always take us to wherever it's going to take us. That's why we have to find the eddy. Sometimes we have to go fast. Right? When we go fast, it's key that we go fast correctly. We have to go fast with selfless ambition, meaning we are going to execute and we are going to get our work done. But it's not all about us. How can we make sure that the other people in our firms and our organizations get the work done as well? And while we work, we value others. It's about communication and about execution. We have to get our work done, and there's no excuse to devalue somebody just because they're making it hard. That's going to create a poor working environment and a poor toxic culture over time. Then there's the grind. The grind is about ownership and agility. Organizations that have a culture of ownership, meaning if you have a leader or a team member that screws up and they say, that's on me, now we don't have to worry about blaming anymore. We can just move forward and solve the problems. Organizations that are healthy, that are growing, that empower their teams, have a culture of ownership. And when those tough conversations come, we learn what needs to change. And those organizations are agile. So just to clarify, this is about 6 core areas of organizational health: vision, strategy, execution, communication, ownership, and agility. When we see those things working, we see healthier organizations. Now more than ever, we crave clarity. And so how, as a leader, are you going to give clarity to your organization? When we have clarity, it's a much easier to communicate effectively. All right, so here's a question for you. Like, what gets in the way of great results? And just for the sake of time, I want to invite you to chat in your answer to the chat box. What gets in the way of great results? Go ahead and chat that in so that everyone can see it. And let's see what gets in the way of us working well together. Excuses. Fireside tasks, ego, conflict avoidance, egos, lack of trust. A lot of ego in this room, everyone. A lot of ego. Too busy, not enough time, indecision, dictators, procrastination, pride, another ego thing, interpersonal conflict, poor leadership, wrong team members at the table, fear. There's no accountability, not actually solving problems, not moving an issue forward towards a solve, poor communication. We're afraid of change and stretching, poor integrity, lack of accountability, and poor expectation. Now, there's so many things that get in the way of those great results. And I just want you all to notice the trend here. The trend is that we are talking about soft skills. We're not talking about someone who doesn't know how to do their job. We're talking about someone who does not communicate well while they do their job. We're talking about someone's character when we attack their ego and their pride. Lack of employee buy-in. Lack of employee buy-in is typically because of communication challenges and issues. People aren't strong leaders, or we think someone's not a strong leader because we don't feel valued and we don't feel heard by that leader. All right, I think we're on the same page. This is about training and development. It's about communication. How do we communicate when things are going well, and how do we communicate well when things are not going well? So here's our first insight. Number 1, my filters influence what I see. And remember, I don't see everything. All right, we all have a filter. So I've said a lot of words so far in this session. And depending on how you're wired up will determine how you hear the words that I say, because you have your filter. My filters influence what I see. My filters influence what I think. And remember, I have to remember on a regular basis, you are not me. You might not see it the same way as I see it. So I love coffee. All right. I felt terrible this morning because I had a meeting this morning and I was going to go to a good coffee shop and have good coffee. And then, no offense to anybody, I ended up at Starbucks. And so I already felt like I started off on a bad day and sacrificed some of my core values at the very beginning. But the meeting went well as we had bad coffee. So, all right. So I go to Doomsday Coffee in Fayetteville. And my friend Jason roasts the most amazing Sumatra blend coffee. Now, I don't know about you, and you can go in and just participate in this. If anyone in here does a pour over, can you go ahead and chat in that you do a pour over? Yeah, WPS, I love it. Woo Pig Suey for everybody. If you do a pour over, and then in the middle we have what's called a French press, and then on the other side we have, you guys know what that is, the Keurig. All right, so you have this amazing coffee bean that's roasted to perfection and then grinded to perfection. And some people put it into the pour over and they stand there for minutes and just allow the water to permeate through the beans. And it takes a long time. And those people always have a little bit more arm strength because they have to do this every morning. And you're going to get a certain flavor from that coffee with the pour over. Oh gosh, Melissa, you love your pour over. That's fine. We appreciate you, and you are a patient person. Now, if you go to the other side, you have the Keurig, and people take that coffee bean that Melissa uses to pour over, and they say, "I'm going to make fancy coffee today," and they put that coffee into their little pod, like they're doing their own custom brew, and then they close that lid, and water flushes through it at a very fast pace, and then you get this flavored water, and people call it coffee to save what looks like 30 seconds. Now, there's different filters on a pour over and different filters for a Keurig. And then there's what really the best leaders in America and the world do, and they use what's in the middle. It's called the French press. And in the French press, what you do is you put your coffee in the bottom of that, you boil your water. While your water boils, it's the exact amount of time that you need to make your toast and a fried egg. Then you pour your water into the French press, you have your breakfast, and then you slowly press that down and you get a perfect cup of coffee. Now, we all have our filters, and we typically think that our filters are the best, as I think French press is the best. And Melissa, I appreciate you. I just, think that you're wrong. And so we have these three filters. I say that in jest. I just don't have the patience to pour. All right. We have our filters. Our filters impact the flavors of what we think, of what we see, of what we feel. So the same coffee being filtered three different ways will give you three very distinct flavors. We've got to understand that everyone has a different filter than we do. And we need to learn how to appreciate those different filters instead of get upset by it. Our filter impacts our perceptions, and our perceptions might not be accurate. Try to see through the filter of who you are working with, and you will improve your communication and influence with them. How do we have results and healthy relationships? It starts by really understanding, not just that people are different than me. Like, I get that. I'm a different person. However, it also starts by understanding here's how they're coming at a situation. Here's how they're trying to solve a problem. And sometimes I'm a little bit slower. My wife told me that for 14 years. I'm a little bit slower. I need help. And so there's a tool that I use to help me see this in a very data-oriented way. It takes the guesswork out of what to do. It's called the core strengths. And so this measures how we lead in two conditions: when things are going well and when I'm in conflict. When things are going well, everyone has three primary motivations that work together and they blend together. So there's a drive for people. So a drive for a people would be someone who thinks about a person's face, a person's name. How will this decision make someone feel? That impacts their filter, and it impacts what they say right away. Then there's the red, a drive for performance, a drive for results. What's the bottom line? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal? Then there's people who have a drive for process. How is this going to work? What is the strategy? What is the data? And so we all have different motivations that impact our filter, how we communicate. Then there's leadership when things are not going well, when we go to conflict, when crap hits the fan. And when things go to conflict, our motives work in sequence and not in blend. And there's a shift in our communication and a shift in our leadership. I'm going to talk to you through that in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure you get this. Just when things are going well, everyone's at their best. Look at this demo slide up here. So this is a look at everyone's sweet spot for leadership. So you have people in an organization that are in the red, in the green, in the blue, a blend in between, and in that middle, we call that the hub. And that's someone that says the words, "it depends." Literally, every time they have to make a decision, they say, well, it depends. It could be this or it could be this, because they're choosing which filter is important for each decision. Here's why this is important. I'm coaching a leader who is in that blue area, and she's a phenomenal leader. She's brilliant, but she's reporting to a boss who is a red. And so she goes to the boss and uses words like, "I think," or "maybe we should." And the red boss, who's performance driven, then thinks this person doesn't know what to do because they say words like "I think" and "we should." Well, the blue is just trying to get the input of the red. And the red's like, they must not be competent, because they're speaking different languages. But when we pull this up, now they learn how to communicate with each other and how to value one another rather than um, accidentally devalue or dismiss. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people put into performance improvement plans simply because of poor communication when it's on the leader and on the team member to learn to appreciate and see the differences of the filters of one another. So we have a data oriented way to make this easy, to make us know how to ask the right questions based on who we're talking to so we can solve problems in a more effective way, get to a better result with a healthier relationship. So, insight number one, just to recap, my filters influence what I see. Remember, I don't see everything. Think about it this way: if you're a green, you don't see it like a red does. How can you learn to? Like Chad talked about in his talk, we have to have empathy. This is a tool to help us know how to develop our empathy. My filters don't influence what my filters influence what I see. Remember, I don't see everything. So what's our action step? Discover what others see through asking questions and listening. Yes, you can purchase this assessment. Yes, you can call, but you can also begin the process right away to just ask questions. Ask questions instead of assuming you know what's happening. All right. Now the next step here. Number two, my leadership and motivations change in conflict. When I am stressed, when I am anxious, when I'm frustrated, when I feel unheard or devalued, there is a shift in my leadership. Picture this. Picture this. You're in a lake, you're on a lake in a cove, and you happen to be in a pontoon boat with a slide with your family, and you're loving it. You're anchored, everything's great. Then these people that think they're really cool come in on their 4 jet skis and disrupt everything, and they're running their jet skis pretty close to your kids that barely know how to swim. So you get a little bit frustrated. You pick up that anchor and you go to another cove and you set it down. You have gone somewhere completely different. That's how it is when we lead in conflict. We have how we lead when things are going well, and there is a complete shift, a change when we go into conflict. When we go to conflict, we either do one of 3 things. We either accommodate, assert, or analyze. It looks like this. You're sitting around the conference table doing a strategic planning conversation or talking about strategy for those 2 hours of the month that you talk about strategy. Let's up that time frame. All right. So you're talking about strategy, and those 2 hours, you need that to work well, but it's not, because you have a leader in the room who's having a bad day and their kid is struggling in school and they're trying to figure out, how do I juggle all of this? So they sit there and you say, I think we should do this. Well, they're in conflict and they say, yeah, that's a great idea. It's a bad idea. They don't believe in your idea, but they are accommodating because they're like, this is the quickest way to resolve this conflict. They're not doing it because they lack integrity. They're not doing it because they lack character. They just accommodate. It is their natural way of solving the problem in stage 1 conflict. Now you have another leader who asserts instead of accommodates. That's someone like me. And so when I'm in conflict, my first step to solve that is to restate what I've already said. You're laughing because you know there's like, you hate people like me. I'm going to restate what I already said in a way, because you must not have heard me correctly. If you would have heard me correctly, you would have just done what I wanted. And so I assert myself. That doesn't always solve problems well. Then there's leaders who analyze. And so you're there sitting at that table, and there's a question, and it's a tough question. And all of a sudden they go from talking and being collaborative, and they sit back and they open up their computer or their phone, and you're like, are they on Instagram right now hashtagging AAC, or are they just looking at reports? They're looking at the reports. Well, they want a hashtag, but they want to get the job done. They're looking at reports, right? Because they want to know what is the right answer before I engage, but they look disengaged and angry. When we know this about ourselves, we know how to engage in a healthier relationship while moving towards results, rather than accidentally devaluing, creating conflict in our only 2 hours a month that we're talking about strategy. So we got to understand, and we have the self-awareness of what we do in conflict, as well as the social awareness of what others do in conflict. Our motives change when things aren't going well, when we have to tackle tough problems and challenges. Let me clarify what conflict is. There's a great book by Patrick Lencioni. 5 dysfunctions of a team. And he says teams need to go through conflict. I'm not disagreeing with Patrick Lencioni. He's brilliant. But here's what I want to clarify. I want to give you a better language to use. Language is important to have healthy communication. I'm going to say there's a difference between challenge and conflict. So when my clients talk, they'll say to their teams, I'm in conflict. That tells their team members things aren't going well. I feel devalued. I don't know how to solve this. This is getting big. So challenge is about disagreement. Like Melissa challenging me on the French press. You didn't know you challenged me, but you did. You like the pour over. I like the French press. Listen, I don't think we have any debate over like our feelings aren't hurt. It's fine. This is not a big deal. There's no devaluing there. But challenge can move an idea from mediocrity to greatness when we're talking about work. How can we invest in one another and collaborate? However, I might think we're in challenge, but I might accidentally offend someone else and devalue them. Conflict is when we feel offended. It's when I feel like you've threatened my self-worth. So picture that 2-hour strategy session that you have a month, and all of a sudden, 2 out of the 6 people in the room feel like they go into conflict. You're going to have a poor meeting moving forward. Well, we have the way to see this in a data-oriented way to then navigate it and have a language to clarify. This is challenge. This is conflict. Language is really important to help us work through what we need to work through. Here's a look at an organization in conflict. Those arrows represent where someone goes in conflict, and the length of the arrow represents the shift in behavior change, motivation change that someone has in conflict. So when you know this about your team, instead of getting frustrated, now you know how to support. Now you know how to help. Now you know where they're going. And so instead of getting dysfunction and toxicity in the organization, now you can move towards results with healthy relationships. Listen, everyone wants to feel valued. Everyone wants to be heard. When we go to conflict, we stop listening and we stop valuing. Not because we're trying to be rude, but we're just trying to protect ourselves. Well, as leaders, if we are truly about equipping and serving and helping and bearing the weight, how can we use these tools to help create healthy cultures where people are trained to execute well, to lead with selfless submission, to take ownership, to be accountable, so that we can continue to go where we need to go and accomplish what we need to accomplish without dysfunction getting in the way. Here's insight number 2, just to clarify. My leadership and motivations change in conflict. So we need to slow down so that we can go fast. We slow down by pulling up the app to see our tools, our assessments. We use these in one-on-ones and check-ins. We use these preparing for a meeting to make sure we're going to value one another. We have to slow down so that we can go fast. I'm going to share a story about that in just a second. As we move into insight number 3, my response is within my control. Be clear and not disrespectful. We have our natural way of responding to situations. And here's what I'm saying. Just because you feel it doesn't mean you should say it. Maybe you're thinking about it logically, but you're not ready to say it in a healthy way. So our response is within our control. That tool, that assessment helps me respond in a way that's going to be valuable to the person and not disrespectful. How can I slow down my behavior and not continue a cycle of dysfunction when I feel the emotions that I feel? My response is within my control. So we need to be clear and not disrespectful. There's a time where I had a team member who was going through a very challenging situation in life, and I was as well. The pressure to grow the business. And when I'm stressed, the only thing I really care about is what are we going to accomplish and what are we going to do? And so if I'm going to sit down with a one-on-one with you 7-8 years ago, those are my questions. Hey, what are your goals this week? What do you need this week? How can I help you? Pretty clear, not very friendly, not very valuing. I knew that if I asked her these questions, that she is going to break and she is going to quit. And so I couldn't ask her these questions because I need her. But also in my mind, that's all I could think of. And so I said, hey, let's walk across the street to the coffee shop. And the whole time walking across to the coffee shop for this one-on-one, I'm thinking, okay, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Don't ask her about strategy. Don't ask about goals. Don't ask about vision. And so we sat down and I'm giving myself these affirmations. You've been there where I just like, I know if I say what I want to say, I'm going to blow it. We sat down and I mustered it. I didn't want to say it, but I had to say it because I want to be a healthy leader that gets great results as well. And I said, how are you doing? She's a blue, and so that flood of answers came. So about 20 minutes later, we're done with the coffee. She's done with the conversation. And as we're leaving, she goes, oh, by the way, here's my plan for the week. She had it, but if I would have opened with that, would have blown it. So my response is within my control. How do we be clear and not disrespectful? Sometimes we need to pay attention to where we're going and how we're going to get there. So I was up at Slaughter Pin Bike Trails in Bentonville, and I was feeling it. In high school, I did some mountain bike racing, and now I'm not nearly, it's like embarrassing to say that at these days. And so on this day, this beautiful fall day, I was feeling it because my wheels had gone off the ground about 6 inches for the first time in years. And so I thought, this is it. And so I talked to a friend of mine who's also my doctor, and I said, hey, I think I'm going to hit that jump. I'm going to do it. And then he said, do you want me to record it? And I said, sure. And so when you are on video, then you go faster than you should. And so I want you to watch this, and I want you to think through, this is what our leadership is like when we hustle with no vision, with no clarity, with no planning. This is what it's like. All right, let's, do I have control of? It's like a new, here we go. The suspense was there. You're welcome.
Oh,
just look at that for a second. And I can't believe that he said, oh, snap. At the end of that 2x4 ramp, there was a drop off, and I was feeling it. And sometimes we feel like everything's going to go well, but we don't plan properly, and so it doesn't. I want you to think about it this way. When I'm saying that you can choose, your decision making changes. You can choose how you treat people. You can choose how you communicate. I want to prove this concept to you. Maybe we shouldn't always do what we've always done the same way. So if you look at this, you see that as I went up in the air and forgot that there's another ramp, my wheel crushed against the other side, and then I just went over the handlebars. And so everything falls apart when we don't plan properly. Everything falls apart when we try and always lead the way we've always led. Things have to change. We have to empower our people. We have to listen differently, pay attention to their filters. When we don't, I want you to think about it this way. When we don't, it's like our face is sliding across the 2x4s. And let me tell you, like, that hurts. It doesn't feel good. And your wife is not proud. We have to think differently about how we are leading. We shouldn't always do things the way we've always done them. So how do we communicate with clarity? How do we communicate in a different way, in a way that builds healthy relationships and moves towards results? All right, number one, say what you mean and mean what you say. Number two, say what you want to say consistently and creatively. And number three, say what you want to say in a way that matters to you and who you are saying it to. We have to learn to communicate in ways that are different than our first filter, because we have to communicate towards a filter of someone who's different than us. So say what you mean and mean what you say. Well, that means I need to say it in a way that other people can hear and understand, not just my natural way of communicating. Now, here's a little bit next level tip. When you sense that someone's not understanding, let's not get frustrated. Let's have the courage to ask the right question. So ask the question like, hey, what's inside that pause? Well, they're thinking, they're processing, but they know that you're paying attention and you care about what they're thinking. What's inside that pause right there? Can you explain that? Can you walk me through the pause? When people pause and they don't respond well because they're nervous about how they're going to make you feel. You can ask the question, hey, what excites you about this, if anything? You can say, what's not exciting about what I'm sharing with you? You can say something like, I'd like to get better at learning to communicate. Can you help me understand? Did you hear what I'm saying? And what we're doing is we're asking questions to drive for clarity instead of just telling them what we want to tell them. This builds healthy relationships. When we have clarity, we have better understanding of our expectations and where we're going and how to get there. Team members feel supported and encouraged and valued. And that automatically builds to healthier relationships and greater results. Those two things together moves to greater retention and profitability in the organization. And to clarify, it moves to greater retention of who you want to retain instead of retaining people you don't need to. Let's go a little bit deeper here. We don't just want to communicate with clarity, we want to communicate with inspiration. And so we've got to be understood. When we are going to be understood, we need to connect that message to options. Give options and connect the message to people. Explain how their actions will benefit others. Connect the message to goals and results. Put the bottom line up front, especially if action is required. Connect the message to data and process. Support it with evidence and procedures. What we're doing here when we connect the message to different ways is we're communicating to different filters. So if you have something extremely important, share it in multiple different ways, not just one way, so that you can be understood. Get people to buy in, to hear, to feel valued, to get excited, which means I've got to communicate it in a way that's different than only my way of communication. Number two, be heard. Be heard. Ask, how do you think that will work? How do you process what I just shared? Hey, can you share with me what are the pitfalls in what I'm thinking? Be heard, meaning don't talk more, ask questions and listen, then you know if you're being heard. You know if they're with you or if you need to recap to get a new understanding. Number three, be influential. There's a book called Influence. It's a brilliant book, but here's one of the key things I want you to grab from it. If you provide reasons for what you're asking people to do or what you're asking people to shift towards, they are 7 times more likely to jump on board than if you don't provide a reason. With no reason given, there is no compelling reason for someone to participate. So if you want to influence your team, influence a decision, provide reasons that connect to why it's good for that person, the team, and the organization that you are working with. And number 4, actively listen. Say, hey, can you share with me what you've heard? Am I missing anything here? Hey, to clarify, you're wanting me to do what? And then if action steps are needed, make sure you recap on what those action steps are and that you are clear with one another about those so that everyone knows how to move forward together instead of getting stuck. All of this requires us to slow down. We've got to slow down. We've got to pull into the eddy and slow down. And when things are chaotic, it is tough to go slow. A story that stuck out to me right away, 1, I think because I'm a soccer coach, 2, because goodness, this is the soccer team that was stuck in the back of a cave. Kids stuck in the cave for 18 days. As a parent, I can't imagine. As a coach, I can't imagine it. They were the wild boars, and they were going back for a kind of a birthday, rites celebration here. And the rainfall came. You remember the story, and the cave started to fill up, and they couldn't get there. Everyone around the world was paying attention to this story, and we're wondering, why is it taking 18 days when kids just walk back there? Why can't we just go get them out? It took a major engineering feat to make it happen. Here's a quote from one of the SEALs. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. At the start, no one really had any idea about what to do. And officials brought equipment in. Elon Musk was going to build something crazy. They were figuring this out. They were drilling, whatever they could. But they said, we have to go slow so that we can go fast. If they would have rushed in, it could have been a horrible thing for everyone. I want you to remember that in the chaos, We have to go slow, but slow does not mean isolating yourself. Slow does not mean accommodating, letting someone else take the charge. Slow does not mean dictating direction. It means, hey, we're going to slow down. We're going to come together. We're going to communicate effectively. We're going to get the best plan possible, and we're going to move forward. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. To be healthy leaders that are driving results with healthy relationships, we've got to be able to slow down to have the right mindset, to align on the problems that we're solving. There are a few things that we need to do to get there, some tactics. Let me recap something here. When I'm talking about slowing down so that you can go fast, my response is within my control. Be clear and not disrespectful. So I've got to slow down. When you don't understand what a team member is saying, and there's so many times I don't understand what people are saying. When you don't understand, ask and. Can you tell me more about? So I got this principle based on from improv leadership. And then I started trying it out on my wife, and she sat through a session. She goes, "You've been doing that on me." I was like, "Yeah." "And how's it going?" She's like, "It's been good." Because before I would just shut her down when I thought I was right. I would assert, and that devalues. I don't want to devalue my wife. I don't want to devalue a team member. I don't want to devalue a client. And so where I'm stuck, and can you tell me more about whatever I think I disagree with? Can you tell me more about? And what happens probably 97% of the time is that when it's restated in a different way, I'm like, oh, we're on the same page. So all it takes is slowing down for a second. So learn more instead of cutting the conversation off. Show that you value people and serve as a leader by asking questions. Help leaders communicate and engage, build healthier relationships, and get great work done together. If we can see from one another's filter, it's a game changer for us as leaders and the people that we have the opportunity to lead, to help them love life at work and love life at home. So here's what I'm saying that you do with this. You're saying, I'm listening to you, I'm not writing you off. You're saying, I think what you think matters, even if I don't see it the same way. You're saying this is a relationship, not just a transaction. My response is within my control. Sometimes we have to slow down so that we can go fast. When we slow down, engage in the communication. Number 4, this is the last one. If I can't own it, no one can move through it. If I can't own it, no one can move through it. Ownership and accountability are key in every organization. And so what does a culture of ownership look like? I think this. People who look for someone to blame never move on from the situation or the tension that they are in, because leaders take ownership and move forward because they know they have to go forward for the organization, for the team, and for themselves. All right, so people who look for someone to blame, they can't move on. They're always stuck where they were instead of moving forward to where they need to go. So how do we create a culture of ownership? How are we healthy leaders moving forward? If I can't own it, no one can move through it. So as leaders, we have to own it. We have to own the problem, own how we got there. Yes, it might be someone's fault, but they didn't know, so it's hard to be accountable there, but we're going to shift gears and drive for it. So leaders take ownership and move forward. All right, let me share this with you. This is a way that we've done this for a lot of organizations. And when we're thinking through, just real quick on that chat, that book that we talked about was 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, as well as the book called Influence. So there's something called 201 performance management. And because it's lunchtime, at least in Arkansas, I think it's fair to say we need to talk about it. So when you smoke a pork shoulder, a pork butt, and it gets to 201 degrees, that's when you get to perfection. Now you can eat it like at 164, but it's disgusting. It doesn't work. Is it technically done? Yes. So think about it this way. You have an employee that you hired, but you treat them like they're at 201 when actually they're at 160 in their understanding and in their clarity. So how do you get a team member? How do you get an employee to 201? Well, that's through effective communication, effective development. When we're at 201 together, we can rest. We're working together. We're peers navigating things together. We are not just treating everyone like they already know exactly what to do and how to do it, and burning people out and frustrating people and creating toxicity and devaluing on accident. So it's called 201 performance management. The research shows that frequent informal check-ins lead to more meaningful discussions and deeper insights with greater employee satisfaction. Check-ins are hard. How do we schedule it? How do we get the time? What does that look like? What do we do? Well, the first thing that you got to make sure you always have is a clear, like people need to know their roles and leadership expectations. If they know that, we can move forward. The second thing is weekly and bi-weekly or monthly check-ins. And the third thing is regular follow-up, regular conversations. It's a simple process to help move people from where they are to where they want to be and where you need them to be. So we clarify expectations for the job, the project, or the task. We help people leverage their strengths to move forward, and we do it in an informal way that drives better results because people feel valued and heard moving forward. So we've got the rest, we've got the hustle, and we've got the grind. How do we have healthy relationships and drive results? Well, we've got to be able to find the eddy. We have to have vision and strategy for ourselves as leaders, for our teams, for our organizations. And we need to hustle. We need to have selfless ambition and value others. Execute on our goals and value people in the process, and using tools to effectively not devalue someone on accident. And then there's the grind, where we take ownership and create cultures of ownership where we know if something needs to change, it can change, and we're agile. We shift gears. All right, let's do that for ourselves. Let's do that for our teams. Let's do that for our organizations. And let's help everyone that we have the opportunity to work with, to lead, to serve, to love life at work, that you have the best place to work. People look forward to being there or on a Zoom call with you or collaborating with you on a project. It's the best place to work. Love life at work. And because we love life so much at work, it's easier to go home and engage and love life at home. And the same communication skills for work, let's use those at home too. It's been an honor to be here with you all. We've got a few minutes left. If anyone has a question, we can do a short Q&A for a moment. So go ahead and chat in questions, and we will rock and roll from there. Is that a question? Is that something coming in? All right, Melissa, it's been awesome to have you on here, and I hope that you enjoy a pour over later on in the day. Yeah, so everyone, and on this next slide here is my contact info and Chad's, like you most likely have. If you need anything moving forward, feel free to shoot me an email, and we can dialogue anytime. What's this?
You talk a bit about
the triangle. Yeah, I can talk about a triangle. So let me pull this back up. Okay, so the triangle shows us 7 regions for where we are motivated. So each black dot that looks like a period would be our sweet spot for leadership, our motivational value system. Your sweet spot for leadership will not change over the period of your life. Like, you are wired up how you're wired up. I'm not talking about your values, your life mission, your purpose, your skill sets. I'm talking about what motivates you and drives you. So the triangle shows us that for ourselves, to help us drive that self-awareness. It also shows us that for our teams. So the people in the red have more of a drive, a filter for performance. They're motivated by performance. The green are people who are motivated by process. And the blue are people who are motivated by people. And the middle are people who choose which one's important for each situation. Now, this is our motivation. This is not about our behavior. The other part of this assessment I didn't go into because we just didn't have a lot of time, goes into our strengths and our overdone strengths. Strengths are behaviors that we use to be successful. Overdone strengths are behaviors that we use to try and make something work, but we end up making a mess. And so the triangle shows us our motivation, how are we wired up, and how are other people wired up, and then what are our shifts in conflict. So I hope that helps. And if you need more information, if you want to learn more about that, just shoot me an email anytime and we can talk through it. Are there any other? All right, Jen, we've considered implementing a leadership and talent group within our firm, but it is ideas coming from other leaders in the company, not principals. How do you suggest pitching the idea to principals, get started, etc.? One, I'm going to say I'm sure Chad's got a lot of information and thoughts on that, but I'll say this. When I look at how to pitch an idea to principals, it's about collaboration, right? How do you get your owners involved? How do you get the people excited about it? And so use the data that Chad showed you in a state of the industry to leverage your thoughts and ideas. I wouldn't lock it in. Hey, here's what we're thinking about based on the data. Here's how we can see it impacting our firm. Here's the data behind it. Here's the stories that show this will work. I would encourage you to do it in a collaborative way using the data to drive the direction. But if you think about how to communicate effectively, don't just use the data, share a story of how it's going to change someone in your organization. Share a result of where this is going to get you, and be open about ideas on how that principal can invest in, because your goal is to influence them to get as excited about it as you, so it can live and breathe through the organization. Hope that helps get you a little bit started on that process. Those are good questions. Tough questions to answer in a minute. Those are like 2-hour questions. Okay, more about the triangle. When you're adding new members to a leadership group who has been together for a while, what are good ideas? So whenever we are onboarding, I'll say onboarding new members to a leadership team, similar to onboarding new members to an organization. How can we get that to work well? So I found that an assessment like this is a game changer for helping people right away to see how we're wired up, what our skill sets are, where we go in conflict. And so we push through the barriers that happen relationally just because we're getting to know each other much, much faster, so that we can hit the ground running instead of moving at a pace we don't really need to move that slow with. And so I would say use a tool like this, grab some coffee meetings, and figure out how one another's wired up when you're trying to figure out where to go and how to get there with your team members. Yeah, and I'll add one more to that. Oftentimes, in a group and a leadership team that's established, it's tough to break in. And so, what are some commitments on how that team is going to operate moving forward? What are they going? What is that team, that leadership team, going to do differently to make sure you can integrate someone into the organization, into that leadership team who wasn't there before, that they don't have to find a way to kind of pay their dues to get in, to have a voice, but automatically they have a voice. Any other questions coming up? All right. It has been a lot of fun to be with you all. Hope you enjoy the rest of the experience. And if you need anything, just feel free to reach out and we can dialogue deeper at another time. All right. Enjoy the afternoon.